Noah, name me a functional NFL organization.
I don't know, man. Maybe like the 49ers?
Well, according to Jimmy Haslam, the Cleveland Browns would be considered functional. I don't even know how to respond to that, honestly, because if there's any dysfunction in the NFL, it is the Cleveland Browns. A lot of stuff coming out lately. We've been talking coaches. Obviously, we've been talking quarterback. There are a few headlines, though, that kind of combine the two of those things right now. What's your take on the latest news, Noah?
Well, let's get into the latest news because it is the title topic of the show. And I think this is the most interesting, most juicy, most Love Island esque moment in Cleveland Browns history. We had our former franchise quarterback, Baker Mayfield, quote retweet a reporter from Atlanta talking about Kevin Stefanski getting hired over there. His name is D. Orlando Ledbetter. Yes, he goes by D. Orlando Ledbetter, the full thing. He is a columnist for the Atlanta Journal Constitution. He put out talking about Kevin Stefanski had a dumpster fire at quarterback in Cleveland, talking about Baker Mayfield and Deshaun Watson, who failed. Baker Mayfield responds with, "Failed is quite the reach, pal. Still waiting on a text and call from him after I got shipped out like a piece of garbage. Can't wait to see you twice a year, coach." Erik, Baker Mayfield is back on his petty shit. How are you feeling about it?
Well, first of all, to the reporter down there, it sounds like copium. Like it sounds like there's some regret in hiring Kevin Stefanski, and reporters are going, "Well, he had nobody at quarterback. Well, this, well, that." The only thing that would have made that tweet from Baker better is if he put quote in parentheses or coach in parentheses rather. Um, but no, it's interesting. It kind of speaks to the relationship and the breakdown of that relationship at the end of his tenure there in Cleveland. If you recall, he asked for a trade, but there was a breakdown before that. He was getting pushed out. The Deshaun Watson stuff obviously then happened, et cetera, et cetera. But this is a concern, or should be a concern, if you're Atlanta, in how Kevin Stefanski is going to manage his roster and his locker room. I think we've seen it here. There's been a divide, whether you like it or not, over Shador, and part of that was fueled by Kevin Stefanski. So I'm not sure that Atlanta's getting the coach that they think they're getting. I know some of their fans are disappointed in the hire. Um, so it's interesting, but I got to tell you, I am really excited to watch those two Atlanta and Tampa Bay games next year because I think they'll be interesting.
Yeah, I can't wait to watch our two ex girlfriends fight as well, Erik. I can't think of any better reality TV. It is January. We are out of the playoffs drama than this. But I want to play a clip real quick because I have a question.
Let me say this, and some of you said this is a dysfunctional building. I take huge exception to that. The two of them work just like this, okay?
So, Jimmy, this doesn't scream function to me. This doesn't scream lack of dysfunction to me. This whole situation with your former quarterback that you did ship out and your former coach that you threw under the bus. Not, you didn't throw him under the bus. That isn't the right way to put it. But he is the fall for everything that has gone wrong the last couple years. Are now bickering quasi on Twitter. That really looks functional to me, Jimmy. It looks real good to me. I think you have a very functional franchise right now.
I think, Haslam was obviously referring to Stefanski and Barry there. I think, though, what happens, unless he's just completely out of the loop, but I think what he's seeing is what's reported up the chain and keeping ownership kind of at bay. If you have a boss and maybe you're missing some of your targets or your goals, etc., there's that management. You manage up and expectations up. I feel like that's what's happening. And Jimmy's like, oh, yeah, it's all kumbaya because neither Kevin nor Andrew are throwing one another under the bus to ownership. Maybe it's slyly. Um, that's the only thing I can think of because other than that, if you think it's not dysfunctional, then you're living on a different planet, frankly.
Yeah, and I know we've talked about this clip on the show before, but when you are that tone deaf in the media, you deserve to be spoken about twice. When you're eating your words, not even weeks after you made the quote, when you're talking about former people in this locker room, talking about their relationship here when they were here in Cleveland, the fact that your head coach never texted the starting quarterback that he came in with and made it to the playoffs with, and blase, blase, blah, after trading him is absurd to me. I just don't. Yes, it's a business, but there's a human element to this business, man.
But the coach is meant to be the bridge between the business and the players, the personal.
Yes,
And
yes.
that's exactly what we see lacking. Listen, we'll talk about Kevin Stefanski faults till I draw my last breath because there are plenty, and he could very well go on to have a successful career and campaign with Atlanta. But this is part of the stuff that irritated me. The on-field stuff was worse. That's what really drew the you know
The
straw
line,
that
yep.
broke the camel's back, if you will. Um, but this is some of the stuff behind the scenes. We talk about him clearly having favorites. Dylan Gabriel, cough, cough, which I hope they take him in a trade. Um, but we talk about him having favorites and things like that. That doesn't play well in a locker room, especially when you're talking about professionals here. They're there to do a job, and yet he's playing favorites like he's some middle school gym teacher. Um, this is the downside of Kevin Stefanski. I I don't know that he has the maturity that people grant him or ascribe to him. Like I think that he lacks a little bit in that leadership. We talk about what we want out of a head coach, and it's a leader of men. I feel like he's a little lacking there, and maybe this is hindsight's 2020 kind of thing. Um, but I just feel like there's something missing.
Oh, and I know we like to disagree. It's a good time when we start yelling at each other, but we're in lockstep here, Eric. I can't believe the kind of stuff that we've seen, and it's already coming to fruition. We're seeing some of this stuff come and unearth with this Baker Mayfield tweet about favoritism, about what Kevin Stefanski may or may not have done behind the scenes. We talked a little bit before about the quote about Stefanski not liking David Njoku, and then they ended up having a better relationship as that moved on, and they both kind of talked about it in the media. It's just really interesting how this guy rubbed people here, and I'm so curious to see what else continues to come out of the Kevin Stefanski era and how things worked behind the scenes when he was the head coach here with his laissez-faire attitude when it comes to the media, but whatever was going behind the scenes.
And I alluded to on the field stuff, and it comes down to he was stubborn and he didn't change. We saw that stubbornness in his willingness and wanting to call plays and then handing it over when basically the wheels had already fallen off. I think it's that same stubbornness that is plaguing his relationship with players in the locker room part of it. That is not a good trait to have as an NFL head coach. Listen, wish him the best of luck. He brought us an amazing playoff win. He didn't coach it, but playoff win against the Steelers that I will never forget. But it was time. I'm ready to move on. And I think there's a prove it on both sides. I think the Browns as an organization need to prove it. And I think Kevin Stefanski wants to prove that he can be the coach that people thought he was when he was given two-time coach of the year awards, which frankly, a little overrated in my opinion.
I wish him the best of the luck as well, like you said, Eric. I'm ready to slam the door on Kevin Stefanski, but when you have this level of petty in the media, how can you not want to come sit down on your show the next day and talk about it? Of course, we got to sit down and talk about it. But there's some other more pertinent news that came out surrounding the Browns head coaching search, and that revolves around one Mike McDaniel. So Mike McDaniel informed the Cleveland Browns that he is no longer interested. He is moving away from that job, which then turned into him accepting, supposedly, it's not officially official yet, the Chargers OC job. Erik, you were way higher on McDaniel than I was. I was totally cool on this. So this was good news in my book. But there's some reaction to be had here still on both sides of the argument. But this is your guy more than he's mine. So I'll let you take the reins first.
I'm disappointed, more so in the fact that, like, yeah, he was one of my top 5, I would say, just for what he brings to the offensive side of the ball. People forget that he had a really good offense down in Miami before the wheels fell off. But what disappoints me the most here, Noah, is that he is saying, "I don't want you. I don't like you. I don't want you to pursue me." I don't know what that says, if anything, about the Browns as they sit. I don't know what that says about what his interview process was like. For all we know, the Browns might have informed him that, hey, you're probably not our guy. And now we see this. But to hear it the other way around, that he is giving up a potential head coaching position to go be OC. And we know he could have probably gone to be OC for a handful of teams, like quite a few.
Right.
It's disappointing, and it makes me wonder what this process is for the Browns. Now, I will say, the more we talk about it, the higher and higher I get on guys like Grant Udinski, uh, Haas. I know they're young, and I know there's risk and downside associated with that, but I am firmly in the camp of no to Jim Schwartz. We've talked about why. It has nothing to do with Jim. I love Jim. He's a great person. He's a great coach. I just don't think it's the culture setter at head coach, because he's already in the building. It's just extremely hard to do anyway. But I got to say, yeah, really disappointed at the McDaniel news, more because he's kind of spurning us.
Yeah, I think you kind of took the words out of my mouth. I'm not disappointed because I wanted him to be the head coach of the Cleveland Browns. I was always against that idea. I was always against him really having his hands on the offense because of how much he relies on playing in time and the same style of offense that Kevin Stefanski liked, hence why they like Dylan Gabriel. They both were two of the main organizations interested in Dylan Gabriel in the draft. That's my reasoning behind not wanting him as a coach. But my reasoning for still being like, damn, maybe this should be a reality check for Jimmy Haslam, Andrew Berry, and company. I can't even say Dee Podesta and J.W. Johnson or whatever. You can say some of those names, but the list isn't as long as it once was, thankfully. Hopefully that helps us out a little bit. But yeah, it was a public no before he gave a public yes to the Chargers. Like, there wasn't that step that needed to happen there, but at the same time, I get it because he was scheduled for an interview on Wednesday, so today, to come into Cleveland and talk as his second official interview. The other interesting part about this Mike McDaniel situation is the fact that it screws us on the Rooney Rule. So with him checking the box for the Rooney Rule and now no longer taking that all important in person interview to check the box because you need to have two prospects of minority to come in to interview for your head coaching role, that puts them in a weird position if they wanted to go ahead and move forward with someone sooner rather than later, even if it was a Haas who also checks the Rooney Rule. Well, actually, because he is a minority head coach, he doesn't have to worry about, like, if we hired him, we don't have to worry about checking two boxes or
That
whatever.
makes sense.
There,
Yeah.
yeah, there's so many different parts of this. But if Haas isn't the guy and say it's Udinsky, then are we going to bring in, like, I don't know, Josh Cribbs for a second or something? Like, what are we doing?
See, this is my problem with the Rooney Rule. I think, not to get off track because we weren't
No,
really
you're
talking
fine.
about this, but I think the intent behind the Rooney Rule is fantastic. I think
Agreed.
how teams have employed it and used it is less than stellar. They
Yes.
give interviews to guys that they have no intention of actually making coach. We've seen this across the league, and that's really disappointing. The aim of the Rooney Rule was to get more coaches of color, more minority coaches in the league as head coach, and this is doing anything but that. I also wonder why we haven't talked to Brian Flores. Speaking of the Rooney Rule, like, we talked about both of us liking him and being high on him, and to the best of my knowledge, we haven't even requested an interview or anything like that. Um, so I'm disappointed in what the Rooney Rule has become, because it's just become it's like a tax loophole basically, which isn't great. But interesting to note, as you say, especially if we want to move quickly. And that's another thing. Like, are they going to bring in Dirty, who they had an initial interview with, just to check that box? Like, that's doing him no service. Like, I don't know. The whole thing is just a little
It
weak,
is a
in my
little
opinion.
wonky, and I wonder if there's, like, study or, like, actual statistics out there about, like, how effective it's been. And I know we're off topic. We'll get back to McDaniel here in a second, but I'm just curious how effective it really has been in terms of progress in the NFL of minority representation and whatnot. Because when you start talking about it like we're checking boxes, it just doesn't feel right at the same time. You know what I mean? Like, it's just not the right way to go about it, I don't think.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Like I said, I think the intent is really good. I think the execution has been a little poor. Getting back to Cleveland and the search for coach, though, I'm curious what you think, Noah. Are the Browns leaning towards one of these younger guys, or is it Jim Schwartz's job to lose right now?
I do think that the Browns are leaning towards one of these younger coaches at this point, just based off of the tea leaves I'm saying. I think Jim Schwartz is being brought in to talk about his fit as the defensive coordinator, maybe associate head coach, a promotion of some sort. Uh, just moving forward with one of these young guys. And the Browns at the same time are doing their due diligence because we had names like Denzel Ward, Miles Garrett come out and basically co sign him as a potential head coach option for the team. So well, they probably, as a front office and a brain trust, for better or for worse, wants to go younger and offensive. They still want to posture to the locker room that they are taking into account their star players and what they have going on, and ultimately trying to figure out what the compromise of that is. Bringing in a young name like Udinsky or Shieldhouse, as well as still retaining Jim Schwartz, trying to keep everyone happy on all facets, basically.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the more that I hear about Udinsky, the more excited I get. Is there a chance here to lock him up long term, a guy that's going to blossom and be the next Sean McVay? What I
Right.
really like about him is he doesn't seem to be stuck on any one scheme. Like he's not a I favor this X offensive scheme. He's adaptable, and that's exactly what we need coming from a coach and a regime that was anything but on the offensive side of the ball. So thinking about how he could adapt to potential players on this roster, Shador Sanders obviously number one, right? But I got
Yeah.
to tell you, and I know it's unpopular, and I know you disagree with me. Deshaun Watson very may well see playing time this year. Like
He's
I'm
not going
telling
to
you,
play.
prepare for
This
it.
he's not going to play the same owner
Prepare for
that
it.
but I'm not preparing for
The
it because
same
it's not
owner that went to his wedding
who
after he said
cares
it
if
was
he
a
went to his
mistake, just
who
prepare
cares?
for it.
He
Do you
said
want to
it
do a
was the
bet right
biggest
now?
swing in the Met. What?
You want to do a little bet right now?
Yeah, let's do a bet.
All right. Uh
How I want to hear the wording of the bet first, but go ahead.
okay. Here's the bet. A full meal of dumplings, meaning everything that we would normally order as a meal that you pay for, not just one set of dumplings, but the full meal. I say that Deshaun Watson will see playing time this year.
Well, that's where it gets tough.
Oh,
Barring an injury is what I want to say because he'd be the emergency third quarterback, and depending on who we have in front of him,
okay,
I
okay.
could see it. Yeah.
Barring two injuries, then. If he comes in after two quarterbacks are injured as a third stringer, then that doesn't count.
Can we just leave it to an order of dumplings? You make a little bit more money
You
than your
feel
boy.
like I feel like
You
you were
also
so
eat
confident
I'm
60
very
seconds ago.
confident, Eric, but I also know how to be smart about some money, man.
All right, we'll do a single order of dumplings. Shake, shake, shake.
Shake, 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 brother. I want to ask you this though. Do you think the
Sure.
Browns were that high on McDaniel that this is kind of a shot in the foot in terms of what they were planning to do? Or do you think, again, like I think, that they were really going for the two youngest names, the Shieldhouse and the Udinsky?
I think they were pretty high on McDaniel, honestly. From everything that I've heard and read, he was up there for the Cleveland Browns. I hope what they're doing is really doing their due diligence, though, and that they weren't, eggs in basket on anybody. I know they talked with Harbaugh and his camp. Obviously, he went to New York. What we're seeing, though, are these teams like Kevin Stefanski's an example of where they moved up his interview at Atlanta to lock him in, and then he left there having signed a contract. So I feel like are there targets? Obviously, we weren't going after Stefanski, but are there targets that we're trying to hit and other teams are kind of beating us to the punch? Obviously, Harbaugh, I have to imagine he would have been our number one. I don't know the answer to those questions. Is a guy like Grant Udinsky, a guy like Nathan Shieldhouse, are they easy fallback options because they're young and they're not likely to get another chance? Maybe the fact that the Titans took another coach off the board, and we talked highly about Salah. Not that we kind of wanted a defensive guy in here, but I still think highly of him and the kind of energy that I want as a head coach. It just makes me wonder, like, are we sitting on our laurels a little too much? Here's what it comes down to. I don't trust the front office and ownership to make these decisions anymore. That's the sad reality.
Yeah, that's probably the reality. That's why we're a dysfunctional dumpster fire that Jimmy Haslam denies in the media, which is very negative and not what I typically do. And that's just where we're at right now with how everything has played out. I will say, though, that Shieldhaas and Udinsky have gotten interest around the league. And the guys that have come off the board already in terms of the head coaching search are guys that we never even officially interviewed. We never officially had an interview with John Harbaugh. There was rumors of a phone call. We never officially had an interview with Kevin Stefanski because we fired Stefanski.
Well,
Same thing with Halfley. Same thing with Saleh. So to me, I think we still feel like we're in a good spot because 4 jobs are down and
no,
all
that's
of our main.
worse.
Why is
That's
that?
worse in my opinion that the top candidates for jobs that we didn't even interview or reach out to. I'm not saying we should have hired Salah or we should have hired Halfley, but the fact that we're not having the conversation, like, what are we doing?
No,
Maybe we did have. let- Let's pretend just for a second that Andrew Barry knew that Grant Udinsky's his guy from day one. We're just going through the motions. That's the guy we're going to hire. You still interview everybody. Like, what are they doing?
no, but I'm not making the argument like it's a good thing as our perspective. I'm saying that the front office, Jimmy Haslam, are like, well, all of the guys we wanted are still on the board minus McDaniel. So we're still in a great spot right now, week and a half into the head coach search or whatever. I'm not
So
saying
was
that that's
Dylan
the right
Gabriel.
thought
He was
process.
still on the board when we took him.
Well,
That's not necessarily a good thing.
he was still going to be on the board potentially when we took Shador. So
Exactly.
that's just me. That's just me. A lot of drama in the Cleveland mediascape today between getting denied and our ex girlfriends fighting. I will continue to call Kevin Stefanski and Baker Mayfield our ex girlfriends. It's really been a wild, wild 2 weeks of being outside of the NFL season, almost to the point, Erik, where we haven't had a grasp for straws for things to talk about yet or move on to like your typical off-season content. We just have news after news after news. And I love it because it makes our lives very easy. We just get to sit down here and be fiery about the stupidity and then sometimes the brilliancy of the Cleveland Browns. Hopefully we can get back to some of that brilliancy sooner rather than later. But man, what a news cycle coming into your Wednesday morning.
Yeah, from your lips to God's ears that we can get back on track sooner than later. Listen, we are coming up to a slog. That February to April window is a tough time for sports. And I like basketball, don't get me wrong, but post NFL season, obviously the national championship was the other night. Go Hoosiers, that was awesome.
Yes, it
F
was.
Miami. But this post football, especially we're in Ohio, so the cold obviously is going to hit us. Um, it gives me hope that there is going to remain things to talk about, and hopefully we continue to make off-season moves that make sense as well. O-line help, anyone? Cough, cough. Like Andrew, if you're listening, just I'll help you out. We'll help you out, buddy. But I'm excited to stay in front of it. And obviously, we have become a Browns first channel, and there's a very good reason for that because we're a Browns first city. But it's been fun.
It has been fun indeed. And as much as we do like to delve into the Guardians and the Cavs, the Guardians haven't done anything in weeks in terms of signing anybody. And the Cavs just got blown out by the Oklahoma City Thunder on their home court on MLK Day. So there isn't really anything of note to add when you're getting beat by 33 and you're not adding anything in terms of our two other franchises. Be on the lookout for more Guardians and Cavs content. Just hopefully they give us something to talk about sooner rather than later.
Yeah, hopefully they're in the playoffs and we can talk about it. On that note, the debate never ends, but the show does for now. We'll see you next time.